In a fiery speech at Davos, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky blasted the EU's lack of, quote, political will in countering Russian leader Vladimir Putin. And that was reportedly just minutes after Zelensky had met with U.S. President Donald Trump, a conversation which he said brought agreement about what post-war U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine would look like. However, Zelensky did not offer details. This comes ahead of Russian, Ukrainian, and U.S. negotiators holding talks in the United Arab Emirates later today. For more, let's speak to our correspondent in Kyiv, Gulliver Cragg. Hello to you, Gulliver. These are the first trilateral talks since Russia's full-scale invasion began in 2022. How significant is it?
Well, in Ukraine, no one's really expecting any major progress. It's understood that both Russia and Ukraine are very interested in convincing the Americans that there is progress being made towards a peace deal. The Russians don't want the Americans to impose further sanctions on them, quite the reverse. The Ukrainians also don't want Donald Trump to have any cause for blaming them for stopping the peace process. But the fact is, Ukraine is absolutely not willing to give up the part of Donetsk region that its forces still control, not without a fight anyway. And the Russians are absolutely not willing to give up on their demand that Ukraine hand over that region. It's absolutely blocked on that point, and I do not see any reason, and most Ukrainian commentators and experts say they will be extremely surprised if there is any breakthrough on that. Of course, there can be surprises, but the overwhelming majority of people here don't expect any progress to be happening. And it's not really clear whether or not this is actually something new. They sort of talked about them being three-way negotiations with the Russians and the Ukrainians talking to each other directly. It's not clear exactly how that will happen, or in fact it's not clear whether it didn't actually happen before previous meetings, because the format, as the Ukrainian presidential office was telling us this morning, is all very sort of not formal. A lot of the people involved are not career diplomats, so there's not so much standing on ceremony in these meetings. That's what he said. Also, perhaps worth noting that Volodymyr Zelensky by voice message answered journalists' questions this morning and adopted a much more conciliatory tone towards the Europeans, saying, of course, they have done things, pointing to certain achievements that the Europeans had made. It contrasted with the speech he made yesterday, which only reinforces the feeling that the speech that he made yesterday was really intended to please the Americans, Trump's team, and perhaps global public opinion, because perhaps Volodymyr Zelensky thinks it's not a bad thing if the public opinions in European countries, which are not perhaps all that keen on the increased spending on defence and other measures that could be painful being taken by their governments, that he might actually, by kind of criticising these leaders, actually giving them a helping hand towards pursuing the policies that he thinks they need to.
Yeah, and Gulliver, as you're speaking to us, we see the snow behind you. We know the freezing temperatures in Ukraine, Russian strikes regularly cutting power and heating during these freezing temperatures. What's the latest on the ground?
Well, apparently 2,000 buildings in Kyiv are still without heating, and some have been without heating for several days. That means hundreds of thousands of homes. Of course, some of them have electricity some of the time and can plug in electric heaters, so they keep the temperature a little bit above freezing. Some people have got gas heaters, or they're just burning the gas on their cooking stoves, for example. But it's nevertheless extremely cold in many people's homes. Some people's homes are clearly too cold to sleep in, and they sleep in these tents that have been set up by the municipal authorities to warm up in. Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv, today renewed his advice to residents of the capital to leave. He claims that 600,000 have already done so. Judging by the traffic, I'm not sure that's true. But he says things are very bad at the moment, and they're probably going to get worse because more Russian strikes are expected. And milder weather next week is expected to last only a few days before the temperatures plunge again.